This podcast is rated S for spoilers. Listener discretion is advised. Don't forget to view our spoiler-free companion video on our Half Past Podcast channel on YouTube. Welcome to the Half Past Podcast. This is episode 8, the movie review of Minions. I'm Graham Ricks, and here with me is my friend and co-pilot Ian Jones.
I like that you can go to any store right now and buy Minion-shaped Tic Tacs that are banana flavored. That's like the most perfect movie partnership I think that I've ever heard. Like it isn't that they just put them on cereal boxes, because there's that too, or that they're in Happy Meals, but like that is really cool. Like it isn't just on a Dr. Pepper bottle. It's like the perfect partnership.
It actually references the movie, unlike most of those things. They just throw their photos on there.
That have nothing to do with the products.
That's awesome. Before we get into the Minions trailer, or Minions movie, we're going to get into the Hotel Transylvania 2 trailer. So I watched this trailer the other day, and have you seen the first one?
I did see the first one.
I actually have not seen the first one, so I'm still kind of getting acclimated to these characters, and it looks like it's okay. I'm not exactly sure what the whole point is, because I guess he has this kid who might not actually be a vampire, which is what that story looks like for this one.
Yeah, in the first one, he had his daughter basically was coming of age, and presumably they get married, but there was a human that she falls for, which he can't stand, and he's trying to get rid of the whole time.
Oh, so the whole plot of the previous movie is actually like a father-daughter thing?
Yeah. And so now it's like a grandpa trying to keep his family together.
Oh, but, okay.
I'll tell you, for as much material as you think they would get out of this idea, like doing a spoof off of the monster genre.
Yeah.
They really, to me, the first one fell short. Like it wasn't as good as I think maybe it could have been, if you figure that there's all this material.
Yeah, I would think there would be a lot of material. That is something that has occurred, and that story has occurred in other things. And doing a new twist on it via these monsters actually sounds like it would be a really interesting way to do it, because it's kind of like The Incredibles, where it's basically the entire movie is about this family, just regular family problems, but they're all superheroes, so there's all this other, like, everything is just exponentially worse when stuff happens because they're superheroes. And so it's kind of like that kind of story is what you're saying. So it just kind of fell short in the first one.
Yeah, and some of the jokes even in this one to me seem real similar to, just from looking at the trailer, seem similar to stuff they were doing in the first movie. And then of course this is another sequel this year. We've seen a lot of sequels and spin-offs, which I'll tell you, from a creativity standpoint, I get the criticism there, but it is giving a lot of people and a lot of families income, because a lot of these projects are getting done.
Yeah, and they also tend to use some of the same people when they do these sequels, because they already know these characters and they're already doing it. And a lot of these times, these guys, especially with these movie projects, they just kind of get hired and they're almost like mercenaries. They kind of just do one project and they move on to another project, which could be with a completely different company. It's definitely nice to see that they're doing these sequels just in that instance. And yeah, I do understand from a creative standpoint, you definitely want to work on some new material and new things. And we have been seeing a lot of sequels lately, and it's...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it's not just the animation genre. It's just a lot of sequels. The only thing I have to say about this movie that I have left here is really, this seems like this is probably one of the better things Adam Sandler's done in years, which is kind of like Eddie Murphy and Shrek. It's like one of those things. It's been like a long time.
It's just like, can you really count it, though?
Yeah, right?
You know, because it's not really them. They're not really bringing the star power to it.
No, they're not. But it is nice to know that they are doing something that's at least okay. Because it's weird. It seems like there's a lot of people from the Adam Sandler troupe that they always have that work together that are just in these Hotel Transylvania movies.
Yeah, like Kevin Smith and...
Yeah.
Or not Kevin Smith, Kevin James.
Yeah.
The thing that I did like is that, Mel Brooks is going to pop in for this.
Yeah.
Which, to me, is endearing just because he's Mel Brooks, but he also did Young Frankenstein.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which was just incredible.
It is a very good movie. I like Young Frankenstein. Now that we're done with this Hotel Transylvania 2 trailer, let's go ahead and get into the Minions review. Alright. The Minions, Kevin, Stuart, and Bob go to Villain Con in search of a new boss for their tribe. After meeting Scarlett Overkill, they hatch a plot to take over the world. This movie is directed by Kyle Balda and Pierre Coffin. Kyle Balda actually co-directed The Lorax and has been involved with a lot of animation throughout the years. He seems to... I was looking at his biography and he shows up a lot. He's just been an animator and an animation director for just several movies throughout the 90s, actually.
Well, Pierre Coffin really, too, is like one of the rising stars. He's a well-known French animator and director. Yeah. He's done all the Despicable Me's. He writes, he acts in the movies.
Yep, and he's the voice talent behind the Minions also. He also was an in-between artist for We're Back, a Dinosaur Story. Huh?
Wow. That's been a while. That's the grunt work.
It is.
The guys having to do the in-betweens and the cleanups.
I remember when we were in school and learning all that stuff.
Yeah.
And man, it varies so much in the quality of the keyframes from animators. Sometimes they're actually kind of like they actually attempt to clean it up a little bit. But man, sometimes those in-between artists have some work behind them. It's like, holy crap, I can barely see the character amongst all these lines. It's
yeah. So for people who don't know traditional animation, the animators were really kind of the rock stars, and they would just do the first frames. But as Graham's pointing out, it doesn't look like the final product. So there's a whole team of other guys who come in and clean it up, and they kind of just go on like a smoke break and they just like mail it in. And they're, whatever, we're at the top of the food chain. The rest of these guys will clean it up and actually make the lines look clean. And
yeah, it's pretty bad.
It's pretty incredible to look at what they actually do.
Yeah, from to see just even the 10 frames of animation go from beginning to end is just like, holy crap. Because it's just all over the place sometimes with those lines. This movie's starring Sandra Bullock as Scarlett Overkill. She was also in Speed, The Net, The Blind Side, and Gravity.
Yeah, the star of Speed 2, Cruise Control. And I will never forget sitting in a movie theater and seeing that trailer come up, and when they at the end when they do the little tagline Cruise Control, there was this collective groan in the audience. They were just like, oh. And I'm like, oh, Oh, that's all. That's just
amazing.
That's great.
The only other time I've heard that happen is I can't remember what movie I went to go see, but during the trailer, there was that movie. What was it? I think it was just called Devil by M. Night Shyamalan.
Oh, right.
And they did the entire trailer, and it pops up at the very end. It's like M. Night Shyamalan, and then the overwhelming groan. The entire theater was so bad. I was like, wow, there's a lot of people that don't like M. Night Shyamalan.
Yeah. Not anymore. Boy,
not anymore, man. It was like, God, it reverberated through the theater. It was amazing.
I think that was the same thing too for Airbender. You know, when his name popped up there, because I didn't realize he was doing it. And boy, what a waste of a really great franchise.
A really great franchise. I actually had some hope for M. Night Shyamalan because I thought he is finally doing something that isn't like twisty. And I was like, well, maybe he'll do better on this one. And that actually just ends up being an awful movie. It's so terrible. I can't believe that. I don't understand when they make these movies that already have a franchise. Like The Last Airbender. It's done. It's already done.
Yeah.
And people already love it. Why the hell do they change it so much to where people just hate it? And it's like, it's already done. It's done. It's like free money. It's almost like printing money, and they just refuse to do it.
Yeah, the adaptation was terrible, and the lore behind that, between Avatar and The Last Airbender, is so amazing.
Yeah, it is.
That it just seems like that should have been a slam dunk. But you know, that's just like a lot of the comic book movies of old.
Yeah,
where they just couldn't get it right.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. John Hamm as Herb Overkill. He's also from The A-Team, Sucker Punch, and Mad Men is probably what he's most known for.
He comes in right at the end of The A-Team.
Yep, as Lynch.
Which I thought was great, and I really wanted to see a sequel that had him in it.
That would have been real interesting. Like, that movie, I mean, it's obviously a bad movie, but it's just so much fun. Like, it is. Yeah, it is a lot of fun, and it's a movie that does not take itself seriously from the beginning. And so it's just like, okay, that they're just being crazy through the whole movie. I think it's just, it's a ride. And one thing about that movie that I liked was, in the trailer, they didn't show that end scene at all in the trailer. And there's like, that's where all the crap goes down.
Oh yeah, like all the shipping container disaster.
Oh yeah, and there's
just
not a lick of that in the trailer at all, and it's just such a surprise at the end of that movie. You're like, holy crap, this is where all this crap is. Look at all this stuff in here. They didn't use any of these shots. That's amazing.
Yeah, which, you know, I have to applaud studios for not doing that, especially since we just saw a movie where they blew it.
Yeah, in Terminator Genesis, they kind of blew the whole thing.
John Hamm also crushes it whenever he hosts SNL. I mean,
I haven't watched SNL in years, man.
He's worth, I think he's done 2 or maybe 3 episodes, but he is always fantastic, and the show is strong throughout when he's there. So it's definitely worth checking out.
I'll have to check some of that out. Michael Keaton as Walter Nelson. He was also in Mr. Mom, Johnny Dangerously, and of course, Batman.
Johnny Dangerously is a really good one.
I like Johnny Dangerously. It's kind of doesn't matter anyway because it's hard because I'm already just a fan of that era. Like, I like noir type stuff. And so that one is just kind of fun how it makes fun of the 30s gangster movies. It's just kind of cool. I like those.
And, you know, what's fun about that is, you know, really that was the last time I think we got to see Joe Piscopo. And,
oh, yeah.
You know, what an amazing talent who just, I guess, didn't didn't want to put the weights down anymore.
Yeah, I guess not.
You know,
Yeah.
and you know, it's so great that Michael Keaton sort of has that Batman title, because everyone forever will always be compared to him.
Yeah.
And he's just like, you know, well, whatever, I'm Batman, and that's never going to change.
Yeah, it's great. It's Michael Keaton. I'm really glad that he's had this little comeback also, because he was kind of a ghost for a little while.
Yeah, for 10 years.
Yeah, and
You know?
and he's a really good actor, and he was just really successful in the 80s and the 90s, and he just kind of fell off for a little while, and now he's came back, and you know, he's in the other guys too, which he's just great in that also.
Yeah, if you look at his films, he came back in 2010, and he was really only doing voice work.
Yep.
And that was the movie he came back for. And I think that was a good one to break in, because he got to, you know, ad-lib a lot of stuff and
Yep.
mix it up with those guys.
Allison Janney as Madge Nelson. Madge.
Madge Nelson.
She was in Miracle on 34th Street, 6 Days, 7 Nights with Harrison Ford and Anne Heche. You remember Anne Heche?
Vaguely. She's like a movie trivia thing from the 90s that no one will remember.
Yep.
Like she should be on Hollywood Squares or something. She used to blow the tabloids up, and now it's like, who?
Who?
What?
I don't know who that is. And she was also in Mr. Peabody and Sherman. Next up, we have Steve Coogan as Professor Flux and the Tower Guard. He was in The Indian in the Cupboard, Night at the Museum, Percy Jackson, and The Olympians, The Lightning Thief.
I guess I forgot about Night at the Museum. That is a different I was gonna say he usually plays a rich guy or like a movie director,
Yeah.
but you
Yep.
just named some where, you know, okay, I guess I have seen him in some different parts.
Yeah, he plays like, I think he's Octavius in Night at the Museum, I want to say. And that's kind of a different type of character. And then he's like Hades. He's, not Hades. What the heck is the name of
Ares?
Ares. Is it
Poseidon?
Ares?
Which god are you referring to?
Well, it's from Percy Jackson.
Yeah.
So it's one of those mythologies. It's
Okay.
not. I can't remember which one it is, but he's like the god of war dude or whatever.
Okay,
in
if
that
it's
one.
war, it's Ares.
Jennifer Saunders as the Queen. She was in Spice World, Shrek 2, and Coraline.
Yeah, I think the only thing I've seen her in is a couple of episodes of Friends, which,
Yep.
you know, by the way, I hope Brits can take a joke.
Oh, I know.
know.
Throughout this movie, it's
So I think we'll get into that.
yeah, we'll get into that later. Jeffrey Rush was the narrator of the movie. He was in House in Haunted Hill, Pirates of the Caribbean, and Finding Nemo.
Okay, so Captain Barbossa. You know,
Yep.
to me, this didn't even sound like him, because I always think of the pirate
Yes.
accent.
Mhm.
And I wish he would have just done the whole movie that way, you know. And then just they never address it.
No, they don't address it at all. He's just like a normal narrator. There's nothing special about him.
Pirate voices only from now on. I don't care what Jeffrey Rush is doing. He just should do every role as Captain Barbossa.
Steve Carell as Young Gru. He was in Curly Sue, Bruce Almighty, and Crazy Stupid Love.
I was wondering when that big nose would poke into this film. And I'm talking about Gru, not
Yeah. Oh, man. And last but not least, we have Pierre Coffin as the Minions, which is oddly enough, because when you look them up, he is pretty low on that list. And I don't know why, because he's basically the whole movie.
He is the whole movie. He pulls double duty again, and that is a ton of work.
Ton of work. It is a lot of work, and he did a very good job in it, so I commend him. Now that we're done with all these characters, let's go ahead and get into our quirks and likes. All right, now let's get into our quirks and likes section. Let's start with one of my quirks. This movie is a very kid-friendly movie, and I think Illumination Entertainment is filling a hole that some of the others aren't quite filling, because Pixar is really getting away from doing these kiddie movies, and I almost think that maybe The Good Dinosaur might be a real kiddie movie, because Inside Out was just not really for kids that much. And this one kind of fills that hole in the animation department. But there's just a lot of stuff in there where I feel like adults are kind of rolling their eyes at, and a lot of stuff in this movie.
You know, and the thing is, Pixar, I think, has never made movies for kids.
Yeah, you're right.
You know, if you go and look at it, they're for adults, and they have stuff that kids really like, you know, the toys in Toy Story. But I mean, it's a cowboy and a spaceman.
Yeah.
And that's made for a different generation. And that's what separates Pixar from the other guys. The other guys are making kid movies and trying to make them watchable for the adults, knowing that the adults have to take the kids.
Yeah.
Pixar does it the other way around.
Yeah, they do. And that's why it's very possible to see adults going to a Pixar movie. When you go to the movie theater and you look around, there are parents there with their kids because they have to take their kids. But when I went to go see this one, most people there are with kids. It's not like they're adults just going to see a Pixar movie. Like, that's how it works in Pixar. But for these, it's not. That's not the case for these. And so it's very interesting, and I definitely noticed it in the movie. One of the quirks I have, man, is I really don't like Herb Overkill in this movie. He bothers the heck out of me. I don't know why.
No kidding, really?
Yeah, I don't know why. Like, from the very beginning, I'm just like, God, this is such a weird character. He's definitely a character, so he's definitely has a lot of animation to him, and he's very animated, which is something that's really good about this movie. But it seems like, God, every time he was on screen, I just kind of didn't like Herb Overkill.
God, that's so weird, because I think in a way he steals the spotlight in some
wow,
scenes.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, he kind of bothered me. It's kind of like watching what was that movie, Home, with Jim Parsons. Jim Parsons in that entire movie just bothered the heck out of me, and he's the main character of the movie.
Right. Well, I think that's that's worse. Just because
it is worse.
He is the main character. He isn't like a little, you know, change up, a little comic relief.
Yeah, he's just a side character in this movie. Herb Overkill's just a side character, and Jim Parsons' character was the main character. And it took me forever to get used to him in that movie, but I kind of felt the same way every time Herb Overkill was on screen. I kind of just didn't really like him, and I don't even know why. I just didn't like the character. The other thing I thought was interesting about this movie was that apparently the Minions, I swear in the other movies, there's more gibberish, and maybe they just had to do it so that it's explained, they can get the point across more quickly. But it definitely seemed like they were just using other languages rather than just gibberish. Well, they would say, like, they were using Spanish and English and other things.
Right, yeah. And I think maybe they needed to sort that out for this one.
Yeah, I think that was the reason behind it, is they had to do it because these characters were going to be on screen so much.
I mean, if you think that you can just have a vocal talent just go into a booth and say whatever and it be good, you know, that's just not the case. So they were staying pretty consistent with, you know, using the same words to refer to the same thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But, you know, I think that's an interesting observation. Now I want to go back and look at the other ones and see. Yeah,
I do. I want to see the other ones and see how much of that has changed by comparison in this movie than it is in the others. The other thing is, I guess I don't know if this is really a quirk, but there is a tons of shots at England in this movie. It's like you were saying earlier. It's like, man, you know, I sure hope England can take a joke. And it's
Well,
right. There's just so many shots. Like, even during the police chase, and they're just pouring tea. And, like, everybody's drinking tea the entire time of the movie. At the most inopportune times.
Yeah.
And, I mean, even just with how the Queen is with her teeth. And they kept doing the teeth thing. It's like, oh my gosh, man, this is just like so many shots. They
definitely poke some fun at the monarchy, and
yeah, they do. It was very amusing. The also thing is, I think probably one of the worst things about this movie was that the pacing of this movie seemed very choppy to me. It seemed like it like ramped up and then slowed down and then ramped up and slowed down. It wasn't really a solid pacing throughout. And it also even seemed like they just kind of, I guess the attitude I have about it is it almost seems like it was written like off the cuff. It just seemed like that's how it was written. It's like, okay, so we're going to do this scene and then we're going to go ahead and start writing this next scene and then we're going to do this animation and then we're going to write the next scene. And it just seemed like there was a lot of choppiness to it. And that's just something that I definitely noticed throughout the movie. And I am a stickler for pacing because it's really important as an audience member to keep your pacing solid throughout. And this movie just seemed really choppy to me. And the other thing, I thought it was interesting that apparently they have been around since the dawn of time as single-celled organisms. Like, that's just how the movie opens up. And I thought that was just kind of an interesting thing. It's like you were saying, like in a previous podcast, where you thought Gru would have created them, but that's not the case. And that's actually all my quirks, Jones. So what do you got over there?
Okay, so Scarlett Overkill, and there's a lot about her I'll like, which I'll talk about in a second. But
yep.
So it's the 1960s. She's a strong woman,
yep,
a pioneer. It's sort of the right time for the women's movement.
Mm-hmm.
And it blew me away that she had a husband.
You are right. That is very true. And I thought it was strange too, because it's like, wait a minute, she has a husband, and even when he's introduced, it seems like she's just like so fallen for him that she gets really weak.
Right, yeah.
Like when he's introduced, she's like really weak there. And it's a very strange thing. So yeah, you're right. That is something that I did notice also.
Yeah, it's one of those things too where, I'm trying to think of all the supervillains, and that are married, and that alone seems like an oddity to me.
Yeah,
but it almost doesn't seem like that makes sense.
Yeah,
for that character. The other thing too is, if her being so progressive and everything, and yet she still wants to be a princess.
A princess. Yes.
It's just like, oh, you're kidding me. Really? That's her motivation in life. She wants to be treated like a princess.
Yeah, it's definitely a conflict of character, it seems.
I think one of the other little things is that, the minions seem to be able to serve every big bad guy, except for bears for some reason. Like, bears do not like minions. And I'm just wondering how, like, a T-Rex and, like, Yetis are okay, and they tolerate them. But bears just, no, that's,
nope.
And maybe that's a good thing to teach kids to stay away from bears.
Yeah, maybe.
Don't go up to a bear and hit it in the nose with a fly swatter, kids. That's the first rule of camping. The other thing is, although I thought there was a lot of good animation in terms of...
I thought there was a lot of solid animation.
Squash and stretch and some timing and anticipation. I have to take them to task for this because of the Hanna-Barbera style cuts and transitions that they used throughout this movie. And it was something that was sort of, that I was hoping wouldn't be the case. This is a $74 million movie.
Yeah.
And it's doing wildly successful at the box office. in its opening weekend. There is no reason why they should have taken some shortcuts. You know, it's understandable, I think, on some TV shows. And what I mean by this, for people who aren't animators, you know, Hanna-Barbera was always criticized for doing things like explosions and, you know, crashes off screen. So you would have characters run off screen, or you would have action take place off screen and just see a sound effect. And there are so many scenes like this in Minions where, you know, they just don't show the minions do something, or they show something fly by the screen and then you see the explosion. It isn't just all one camera shot. Or like
that does happen a lot in this movie. And you're right, it is it's a way to cheapen the animation.
Right, and it just seems to me like they didn't need to do this. Like, there's so much good stuff in there. I think they could have showed them getting out of the costume when they're all on each other's shoulders. Yeah. From a technical standpoint, I understand how tough it is to do something like that in 3D. Yeah, but it just seems like a cheat to duck out of the frame the way that they did.
Yeah.
So I think that's it for me on quirks.
All right, so let's go ahead and get into the likes. So one of my likes about this movie is I actually really like Sandra Bullock in this movie as a villain. I feel like that in real life, that's just how Sandra Bullock is anyway. She's evil. And so I feel like this was a very appropriate role for her, because it seems like when you see her anywhere or in any other role, she seems like she's always like this defenseless woman almost sometimes. Like when you watch Speed or The Net, and she, even just even Gravity, or she's obviously doing things that are amazing in Gravity, but she's just like a weak character in that movie because she's just so small amongst space, which is a good part of that movie. But it seems like I like the fact that she was a villain, and I thought she played a good villain. And I just like, another good thing is the animation for her, I thought was really good, especially when they did like the bedtime story. And she grabs the axe and she sneaks away in probably one of the most creepiest faces I've seen in an animated movie. And it just really creeped me out when she walks away backwards after she tells them this bedtime story. And even just by the end, she's just maniacal at the end of the movie.
Right, yeah.
And it's just like, wow, she just did a really good job here. And I really liked that aspect of the character. Like, I thought the character was genuinely evil, and it was great.
It is a really good villain.
It is.
I think.
Yeah. And another like I had was the scene with the hypno hat, where they first introduce it, and he puts it on, and he doesn't know how to work it, but it just turns on to Bob, and he starts clucking like a chicken. I'm still losing it right now. I lost it in the theater. I don't even know why. That's not even that funny. But I just I freaking lost it in the theater. I'm still kind of losing it right now. It's just
oh, dang it.
The animation was so perfect. It was great. I freaking loved it. I was like, why am I laughing at this? This is such a stupid little joke. And I just love it. I freaking love it, man. You have no idea. I was just like, this is the best part of the movie. It was one of those things where I was like, 10 minutes later, I was still just popping in my head, and I would just start chuckling. About it. It's just great. I love that scene. I'm like, I want that in like a freaking GIF or something. It's just freaking hilarious.
What I liked is when they go to the tower guard, you know, he's deaf and can't hear anything or see anything, so that device doesn't work. And he's like, what? And
what?
Continues
I don't care.
On him.
That was just kind of a fun aspect to this movie with this stupid little hypno hat. And I was just like, God, that's amazing. I also really enjoyed the Nelson family. Like, if they pop up throughout the movie, and they're always just kind of fun in that movie. And I really like when you finally find out that they're just bank robbers. And they're just like, well, we're going to stop for a second. Anybody want to stretch their legs? And you're thinking they're just going to go to a rest stop, and they're just like robbing a bank.
They put the ski masks on.
Yep, they put the ski mask on, and they're just like, man, we're going to rob this bank. And then they just drive off.
Yeah, I'd almost like to see like a movie with them.
Yeah, I think it would be a fun little movie. The other thing I liked about this movie is it didn't end in a musical number, which is something that that the previous film has done, and I'm just like, man, I can't stand when these animated movies, it's like they don't know how to end the movie, so they just end in a dance number and we're just gonna dance this one off, and then that's it. And they didn't do that in this one, and I thought that was a really, really positive aspect to this movie. My last like here is I thought that they did a really good job, considering they all speak in like this gibberish a huge portion of the time. And the animation is actually just solid. It's really good animation. You know, as an animator myself, we always look at that kind of stuff, and it's fantastic. I think they just did a really good job in the animation in this movie. And it's, you know, speaking of being an animator, there's another movie coming out, Underdogs, that I physically cannot watch because it was animated in a different language. So the mouths don't match up with the audio, and it drives me nuts. Every time they do a movie in another language and then they dub over it, it's 10 times worse than when you're watching like an old kung fu movie or something. And it just really bothers me. And so just as a side note, that's just something that just bothers the heck out of me, and there's nothing I can really do about it. It's just kind of just my own little personal thing. But
right,
done with my likes, man. So let's see what yours are.
Well, I think you touched on a couple of things. Sandra Bullock and the Nelson family, I thought were some really positive things in this. But getting into, I think, just touching on something you brought up with the positive things in the animation. The sound design on this film is absolutely incredible.
You're right. The sound is really good. And I think even because a lot of the stuff they were using like Beatles music too. So even just the soundtrack for this movie is probably great.
You know, every song they go to, I thought was the perfect song. It like matched that, you know, it's the right energy, but it matches where they were and what they were doing.
Yep.
You know, and I liked the language they had with the minions. I thought that, you know, that was probably a real difficult thing to keep that straight and make sure that they were using, you know, the same words, even though it's nonsense. It's consistent nonsense if they're referring to the same thing or the same person. And then they say something that's really understandable when they need to.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, when they need to say something that needs to be stated as it is, they do. You know, because it's the right time at the movie for that to happen. So I think overall, if you look at the sound effects, the music, and the dialogue, this was really strong, I think.
Yeah, it was very strong in the sound department. You're right.
And, you know, there were a lot of little things that I liked, which I think they just sprinkled in there just for the adults, like, you know, the cut to Abbey Lane, and, you know, you see the Beatles walk over them, or
the Abbey
you know,
Road scene.
Of course, there's a, you know, Hendrix guitar, and
Jimi Hendrix.
You know, that there's a Warhol painting, and the only thing he says about it is finally someone who enjoys soup as much as I do, and so they just
that's
stole
a great
that
little scene. Yeah,
that painting. There's just a lot of little fun things like that are in this, and that are just for the adults, because the kids just aren't going to get.
No, they're not going to understand that.
So I think that's it for me, buddy.
All right, so now that we're done with our quirks and likes, let's go ahead and get into the ratings section. All right, so I think this is actually a fun movie for the kids, but I feel like the adults will definitely be rolling their eyes at a lot of the different scenes that are in this movie. And although they have some things sprinkled for the adults throughout the movie, it's definitely a very kids movie. And so I say rent it.
Yeah, I'm going to agree. Unless you have kids, I don't think this is one that, is a must-see in the theaters. So I would agree, rent it. It is really good, I think, for a kids movie.
Yeah, as a kids movie, it's good. I think it's good as a kids movie. It's fun. All right, now that we're done with our ratings, I'm going to go ahead and sign out here, Jones.
Alrighty.
I would like everybody to please go to our website, halfpasspodcast.com.
Like us on Facebook.
And rate us on iTunes, 5 stars.
We're on Stitcher and Libsyn.
And email us at halfpastcast@gmail.com. That's halfpastcast@gmail.com.
Tweet us at halfpastpodcast.
Thank you for listening, and thank you for your support.
Next week, we've got Ant-Man coming up.
Yep, next week we have Ant-Man, so we'll go ahead and see this Ant-Man movie, and hopefully it's a good one.
Go check out a Paul Rudd movie.
A Paul Rudd movie, right? That has nothing to do with Judd Apatow.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
That's weird. It's weird to say, well, let's go see that Paul Rudd movie, but that's kind of what we're doing right now.
That's what we're about to do, yeah.
This is the Half Past Podcast. I'm Graham Ricks.
Jonesy.
See you next flick.